Everyone to those in India, and good morning to those listening in, watching in from the UK and the western side of the world. Today we're delighted to be hosting a very interesting webinar with the HCR team in the UK and ILA in India, talking about the kind of trade opportunities between the UK and India markets. And we're going to be looking at quite a lot of different segments over the course of the next 1 hour. What we're really going to be discussing is the COVID-19 pandemic, which has led to a very dramatic social, health and economic implications, not just for these two countries, but globally as well. The governments of the UK and India, because of their long-standing relationship over centuries, are both taking various measures, in order to deal with the pandemic and sustain the economy, their own economies, with active promotions of the role of investment across the UK-India corridor. And as UK and Indian businesses come to terms with the challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic and start planning for the future, trade and economic relations between the UK and India has become even more important than ever before. India is, as many people probably know, one of the key inward investors into the UK. And Indian companies continue to invest, grow, and expand in the UK, despite the various challenges. India has invested in over 120 projects, created thousands of jobs in the UK, and is currently the second largest source of FDI, after the United States, according to UK government figures. And on the other side of the equation, between 2000 and 2016, the UK has invested more than $20 billion in India, representing almost 10% of all foreign direct investment into the country, and remains one of the largest of all foreign investors into India after Mauritius and Singapore, and significantly ahead of the USA. And we're going to be delving into this relationship in more detail. I'm delighted to have on our panel today, we've got Nicholas Grothman, who's from HCR in the UK. We've got Anupam Digge from ILA, Prashant Deshpande, and we've also got Said Alam from the HCR in the UK as well. And they're really going to be talking about their various sectors that they are experts in across hospitality, real estate, transactions, and really looking at providing great advice across how to manage cross-border transactions and relations across the two countries. Let's quickly dive into the kind of headline kind of country. What are your thoughts on the kind of issues that we're dealing with at the moment? And we'll give you kind of 30 seconds each to talk about your viewpoints on the current pandemic and what it means for the relationship. So Sai, let me ask you first, just to give a
yes, of course. So clearly the tourism sector has been severely impacted by the pandemic as a result of the travel restrictions in place. Tourism is one of the biggest and most rapidly flourishing sectors in India, and the pandemic would have significantly impacted the economic output of this sector. A lot of people travel between the two countries in order to visit family or for holiday purposes. And a wide range of businesses who are heavily reliant on income from such business may struggle to recover from this hit. I read somewhere that it has been estimated that the hotel, aviation and travel sector in India together may incur a loss of in the region of 85 billion rupees. So it could take a while for the tourism sector to kind of recover from this, I think.
Nicholas, what's your viewpoint, on what's happening at the moment, the relationships between the two?
Well, I'd echo that. I think one sector that I'm just going to mention here is the outsourcing, so manufacturing outsourcing. Obviously, that's been massively hit because of supply chain issues. So where we've got clients that have outsourced to India, or actually vice versa, there was obviously these huge logistical challenges due to COVID. that are gradually, I have to say, they're gradually being surmounted. And it's not just by us lawyers with our cunning drafting of contracts. It's more just practical measures that are being put in place.
Super. And then on our India side, Prashant, what are your kind of viewpoints on what's happening at the moment?
I would like to talk about movement of natural persons, especially in the education sector. The Indian international students, they are about the third largest international student group in the UK. And because of this pandemic, this movement has got to stop. And it's an unfortunate part because US visa restrictions could have given actually more impetus to this education sector. Now, while the students can't go there, there is another development. The universities can come here. There is a new education policy 2020 which has been announced just less than 10 days back. And that allows setting up of foreign universities. It proposes a legislation that will enable these foreign universities to come into India. And not only that, it will make some special dispensation for, let's say, regulatory environment governing those institutions, for their governance, and of course, their curriculum. So this is a very important development that has taken place. While students can't go, the universities can come here.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a very interesting development because, which we'll touch on later, because universities and education has normally been quite a off the kind of, not allowed for many kind of foreign universities to operate fully in India. So that's an interesting recent development. Anupam, your viewpoints?
Yeah, I would like to talk about the administration of justice. That's something which has taken a major hit in this pandemic. The criminal law as well as the civil law. The courts are functioning at the minimal level. Initially, there were efforts before the pandemic as well to digitization of documentation, filings, and e-courts. But with the pandemic hitting in, it's gone on a fast track, and there is a lot to do. And I'm sure there are a lot of opportunities in this region as well. And because that's one of the major priorities, because for any democracy, justice or the judiciary is one of the pillar of it, and you can't have judiciary not function. And that's something which is one of the prime focus right now, to get the judiciary up and running in full force again, to have the justice delivered to the citizens.
Yeah, excellent point, which obviously is impacting, not just India, UK, but many jurisdictions around the world. So we want to move on to also the China angle. So the China angle has been really playing out in the last few weeks, and especially between India and China, but also globally as well. So given the bad relationship between China and the UK, is now actually a good time for Indian companies to work with Britain even more closely than they've done before. So Nicholas, what are your viewpoints on that?
It is timely. Unfortunately, you don't like to be taking advantage of a bad situation, and ideally everyone would be trading happily together, but the fact is that isn't how it works. And I'll give an example from just a personal experience. Late June, I had a meeting with an MP, a British MP called Tom Tugendhat. He is the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Now, this was at the time just after the border dispute between India and China had once again, there'd been skirmishes and horrible situation happening. So I asked him, not as a leading question, who should the British government be supporting? And who should we generally be supporting? And he didn't hesitate and said India. And I asked him why, because at that time the facts weren't clear. Who was in the wrong bit of the LAC? Nobody knew at the time. It's all at the night. And we just had propaganda coming from both sides, to be honest. So, and he didn't hesitate though when he said India. And I asked him why, and he said, because India is a democracy and because they're an ally. Now, Tom is also in charge of the China Research Group. So for him to take that position is very interesting. And it reflects generally the way that British policy is going. So that's political policy, which doesn't always drive commercial policy in a democracy. So businesses can do what they like. But having that at the very top end of British politics is really important. And I think similarly, obviously with India, they're feeling the squeeze from China then. India isn't seeing a huge amount of benefit, and the trade is basically going in one direction. So that actually brings Britain and India, who are old allies and have so much culturally in common, you know, with the heritage, and so many people in Britain of Indian or general subcontinental heritage, that also is coming into play again. And we're seeing an increase, you know, so I have to come clean. I'm not just responsible for the India coordination side of the practice. I'm in charge generally of the international practice for our firm. And we have 5 hubs. One of them is China, another is India, and then the United States, Netherlands, and Nordics. India is the one over the last 2 years where we've seen the biggest amount of movement, the greatest increase in interest from our clients. And that is reflected nationwide with Britain, from I think 800 companies in 2018, so just over the last 2 years, 800 companies 2018, 842 companies last year, Indian companies dealing with Britain, and now over 900 just in the first half of 2020 with COVID happening, which is incredible. And these are all really positive signs, I think. The Minister of Investment here in Britain said that the Indian business community has strength and entrepreneurism, and there's active encouragement from the British government to engage with Indian companies. And then the other issue is that the government, because of this, is downloading enormous amounts of guides as to how to deal with Indian counterparties, encouraging exports to India, and all these things which are simply following on from policy. So if I were an Indian company, I would take advantage of that. And because in addition, we also have discretionary encouragement policies in different regions of the UK. So these are interesting because in some cases it's tax related or the use of land related, but these are all things that an Indian investor over here could take advantage of. And lastly, those that are not investing in the sense of buying a property or whatever, they might be simply dealing with a UK company. And once again, the UK government has advice on how to deal with distributors in India or outsource suppliers. All this actually really helpful stuff that in a way undercuts us lawyers, because that's what we charge for. Obviously, there are additional complexities where we can get involved. We can touch on that later.
Yeah, great. And Prashant, what's your viewpoint on that? Is it a good time for Indian companies to work more and more with Britain?
Absolutely, because as Nicholas said, besides this cultural alignment, our legal system, our the governance mechanism, our business language for the implementation of a business language is English. So all the more reason. But the biggest reason is both UK and India need a reliable trading partner. UK because of the Brexit, and India because it has locked out last year from the RCEP with the ASEAN. So we need a reliable trading partner, and that's where we can work together. Now, what has happened in terms of UK and India trade is UK has slowly slipped down to 18th number in the list of India's trading partners, and accounts for only 3% of India's exports. What is likely to change is that on 25th of July this year, that is just about 10-12 days back, there was a meeting of the India-UK Joint Trade Committee. And at that, they have affirmed their commitment to have a free trade agreement. Now, if the free trade agreement comes, before that will be the early harvest schemes. So this is the right time for the Indian and UK companies to make representations to be invested in that early harvest schemes and tap this opportunity to grow the business.
Okay, super. Let's start. I mean, now we've kind of covered the kind of broader aspects of the relationship, the opportunities. Let's start diving into some of the actual sectors. So I want to bring you, Syed, into understanding what's been the impact, of these unprecedented times on real estate in the UK.
Well, the impact, I would say, has been similar to what has been seen across the globe, and almost all areas of real estate have been impacted. I work in real estate, and I specialize in health and social care, and we noticed it immediately. As many deals were immediately put on hold or just aborted. The banks stopped lending, and surveyors began caveating their surveys, meaning banks and investors were unable to rely on their valuations with any sort of confidence. However, the investment market is definitely functioning again. And some sellers have resumed talks with buyers they lined up before lockdown began. And hopefully new post-lockdown deals will only go to sort of bolster the pipeline further. We have noticed, unsurprisingly, that foreign investment, which is estimated forms about half of the total amount of investment in recent years, has significantly slowed down. I imagine this is due to a number of factors, but one major factor would of course be the travel restrictions put in place, as a significant number of foreign investors in the UK, they don't actually have offices in the UK and rely on traveling into the UK to sign documents, etc., and meet with sellers and investors. So face-to-face meetings are still a very, very important aspect to foreign investment in the UK. I think there will be many areas of real estate which will simply never be the same again. For example, I imagine remote working will become a more permanent feature of our lives. And with high levels of working from home, technology across life and business is likely to be more integrated. And this will, of course, impact the demand for office spaces. So yes, so just watch this space.
Okay, super. I mean, we're finding similar challenges on the India side as well, in terms of what's happening in real estate, especially the commercial side.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So let's move on to, I'm going to bring Anupam and Nick back on in terms of, a lot's been heard about making India an attractive destination for doing business with. We all know it's not an easy place to do business, but I know the government has been trying over many years. Can you throw some light on the measures that the Indian government's been taking to attract more foreign business into India? Anupam, could I bring you in to talk about that?
Because you're right in terms of the perception that India generally has about being a difficult place for entry. But that is changing and changing quite quickly now. Over the last few years, the government has introduced quite a lot of new schemes, a lot of reforms have been introduced, which makes India definitely an attractive destination. Like one of the biggest one was in 2017 when GST was introduced, and with the introduction of GST and merging of all the indirect taxes under one umbrella, that reduced substantially the cascading effect that used to have on the manufacturing and the selling of goods as well as providing of services. Yes, there are certain teething problems in case of GST, but slowly and steadily they are being eased out. And I'm sure in the coming year, we will see a lot of smooth operations on the GST front. Similarly, on the income tax front, the base tax rate has been lowered to 15% for new domestic manufacturing companies, including companies engaged in the generation of electricity. So the requirement for that availment is that the commercial production should start by the 31st March 23. Similarly, other corporate tax benefits, including weighted deduction on 30% of additional employee remuneration for 3 years, tax holiday for startups, benefits on R&D expenses. So these are some of the SOPs that have been issued on the income tax front. On the investment specifically, of course, as you rightly said, India was one of the greatest regulated economy, and if any foreigner had to come into India, they had to go through several permissions. But with opening of FDI, there has been substantial change, and there are very few sectors now which come under the permission route. And most of the sectors have been opened up for a direct investment from foreigners up to 100%. And some of these sectors could be even, sectors like the cities and township developments, automotive, chemicals, textiles, and airlines. So that's a major shift from the previous regulated regime. Similarly, one of the important aspects in the Indian context is that there is a lot of intellectual property and a potential for development of intellectual property in India. And the laws around intellectual property are all scattered, and there has been a policy that has been introduced by the government to bring all the laws under, create a connection between all the laws. There should be an interlinkages in your copyrights, patents, trademarks, and major shift in the outlook is that earlier when you had to register your trademark or copyright, it used to be a tedious process. And now the intention of the government is that it will be more of a service oriented. So like you go to an accountant or you go to a lawyer for a service, you go to a trademark registry or you go to the registry that will be introduced by the government, who will provide you a service to and help you with your intellectual properties to identify and register. So that's a major shift from the government perspective on the IPR. Also, other initiatives which have talked quite a bit, like the Make in India initiative, which was launched by the Prime Minister, and that has created a lot of opportunities for manufacturing, as well as created a lot of job opportunities. Many incentives have been announced towards this initiative, and programs are being promoted by the various governments. Similarly, there is Digital India, which was launched in 2015, and that was towards re-engineering and transformation and e-governance in India. And one of the major, I would say, the high point for this was that all over the country there has been a connectivity, and more than 1 billion people have been connected now digitally in India. And that was a great success for the Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile, which was launched by government. And 1 billion people getting connected is a big number, and that's something which definitely people are getting attracted to. Similarly, the ease of doing business has also improved, and India has come down from ranking to 63. Earlier it was at 126, and that's a major jump for India. And that's something which is has also pushed the interest for the foreigners to come into India, and that makes India an attractive destination as well. There is a lot happening on the judiciary as well, because in terms of enforcement of a contract, still India lags at 163rd position. So, for example, the average time for a dispute getting resolved in India is about 1,445 days, and that's something which which we need to work on. And I look at the pandemic right now as a boon in disguise, in terms of we going electronic and having the hearings happening over the internet. That could speed up, hopefully speed up the disposal of disputes and contract disputes.
Yeah, somehow 1,400 days doesn't sound as bad as 35 years. But, Nicholas, let's get your viewpoint in, because obviously from the India side, we know there's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of announcements consistently about where, Make in India, ease of doing business. But what's it like actually from kind of a ground reality point of view from the UK angle, like doing, and what are the kind of stories that you hear, and what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. It's always interesting hearing Anupam talk about that. I mean, 3 years to enforce a contract. Probably shouldn't have told me that. I think UK investors are not always aware of government incentives in whichever country they deal with, and obviously the Indian government may want to try and publicize this, but usually the decisions made by UK investors, they've already made the decision, right? So they've thought to themselves, right, I want to do something with India. It's usually opportunistic, or it's part of a strategy if they're a larger company, and then they start investigating the investment environment. What are the risks I need to minimize? And they start getting their advice. So it's not usually the other way around, that someone tells them, oh, there's a tax incentive, or maybe they've climbed up to 63rd place in terms of ease of doing business, where they used to be 120 something. So it doesn't work that way around. However, there is a sort of secondary level where actually those things do come into play, and it's because when a British company is successful in dealing with India for whatever reason, then of course the word gets spread, and another company now finds that India is on the radar. So it's all about making sure that India is on the radar for British investment or British contractual cooperations with Indian companies, or they're simply sought out. So it could be coming in the other direction. And that's when the regulatory side of it starts to become really important, and getting the message out because of UK investment that's already succeeded. And so that's a way of, in a way, that's know-how rather than regulatory changes. That it's the ability to understand the practical concerns about dealing with India, and less government incentives. So that's the other thing, is that UK investors, when they are comparing places to invest, India is moving up. And I mentioned this last time I was talking, it's definitely moving up very fast in terms of places that people actually want to work.
Great. Moving on to more the kind of, we know India is doing a lot to make it easier to do business. We also know that countries are often vying with one another by offering, like, Nicholas, you were talking about different incentives for investments. I'm going to get Anupam and Prashant back on to talk about, briefly, what are the kind of incentives, that the Indian government is providing to, to draw foreign investors into the country. So Anupam, if you'd like to, give us a brief overview of what's happening, in India.
Sure, because the incentive programs of the government can be, broadly grouped in different categories. So, firstly, I would say it can be categorized by government. So, both central as well as state government have specific incentive schemes, and they are either at promoting a specific sector or development of a specific region. So that brings us to the the geographical factor. Certain schemes are also targeted toward geographical factors, and the government identifies regions that need investment for their development and offer graded incentives by development needs. Then there is also a category by activity focus. So incentives are on offer maybe for manufacturing focused, or could be service sector focused, export related or production linked. So there are certain incentive on certain areas which are activity focused as well. Then the nature of incentive also changes. Sometimes the nature of incentive is in the nature of subsidies that have been offered, or tax benefits, refund of taxes paid. Sometimes duty credit slips are there, infrastructure support is provided, or administrative facilitation is done. And these are the different mechanisms through which the incentives are being introduced in various ways by the government.
Because you are on mute.
Sorry, Prashant, what are your viewpoints on what the government's providing in terms of inward incentives?
So, because it's not only that the countries vie with one another. In India, states also vie with one another for investment, and the incentives that they offer are both fiscal and non-fiscal. The fiscal incentives can be in the nature of GST refunds. It can be capital subsidies. It can be in the nature of stamp duty exemptions, or it can be in the nature of let's say concessional land, concessional power, etc. And the non-fiscal benefits, most importantly, is a single window clearance and then infrastructure support. You can get assured access to, let's say, IT access. You can get roads, water, power, etc. So these are the non-fiscal incentives. But often I've seen that some of the states have very well-designed industrial policies and incentive schemes, and some of them do not have that well laid out policies. But definitely there is an opportunity to negotiate with state governments. And over the 25 years that I have been assisting the company set up businesses and identify investment areas, the factors that we have considered are: one, which is the zone in which you are making investment. If you are going to a backward area, or if you, let's say, go to a premium area, you have to deal with higher investment thresholds, and the incentives are lower. And quite the reverse if you go to the backward area. Secondly, are you actually going to sell in the state in which you are proposing to set up industries? Because the incentives in the nature of GST refunds are wedded to SGST, which is the state government GST part. The third is subsidies are sometimes linked to investments. The higher the investment, higher the subsidies. And again, if you go to backward region, the subsidies can be higher than if you are in the premium, let's say, zone. Next point you have to look at is, are you actually getting, what is the incentive investment period that you are getting? Are you asked to invest in a shorter period, or you have a longer duration? Are you getting expansion benefits, diversification benefits? What is the operative period? This is something that people often forget. Operative period starts after the investment period and actually extends up from 8 to 20 years. And if you close your industry, then actually you have to pay back the incentives. Some of the other factors that you have to consider is employment. Some of the states insist on local employment. Now, locally you don't get skilled labor, so maybe they can give you penning subsidies. So these are various nature of incentives that you can actually negotiate with the government.
Yeah, I think like we were mentioning before, there's a lot like Nick was saying, we don't really know outside of India how much is happening, but there is a lot happening, and especially under the recent kind of government with regards to opening up and drawing FDI into the country. Syed, we're going to get you back in. So back to the UK and your real estate focus. What sectors in real estate are doing well at the moment, and which sectors are struggling, for especially Indian companies that want to come and invest more over there?
Yes, well, I think as has been the case across the globe, the hospitality sector has been hit very hard with a significant reduction in demand, and with major conferences and high-profile events being cancelled. The UK has introduced some further measures recently to try and support this sector, like the Eat Out to Help Out initiative, where an individual can save up to £10 on their meal if they eat out, and then the government subsidises the business the amount discounted. But there have already been many big name high street chains who have folded due to the impact of COVID. And the hospitality sector could look very different once the pandemic is actually over. However, on a positive note, I specialise in health and social care, and we have seen a significant upturn in instructions and deals resurrecting themselves over the last 4 to 6 weeks, I would say. The investors in this sector are clearly feeling confident again. Clearly, a lot of the players in this sector were incredibly busy with their businesses during the pandemic. As for example, care homes were hit very hard by COVID, but it would appear businesses are now definitely starting to look at doing deals again now that the situation appears to be improving. On a day-to-day basis, we deal with the sale and purchase of dental practices, care homes, supported living properties, pharmacies, and children's day nurseries. And we actually see a significant amount of investment by Indians in these areas. So I would definitely say that the health and social care sector is definitely one to keep an eye on.
When you say by Indians, are you talking about like at individual level or like corporates coming in?
Yeah, so corporates owned by individuals, Indian individuals.
Yeah. And do you want to just quickly clarify what social housing is? Because we don't really have the same concept in India. So if you want to...
So for example, you get different types of social housing. So for example, you have care homes. So some care homes you have just purely for the elderly. And then some care homes you have for people with sort of learning disabilities or sort of addictions. And usually in care homes, people need a lot more kind of support. Whereas when you've got supported living, the service users they're a little bit more independent, but occasionally carers will come in and kind of provide them with any support, maybe kind of filling in forms or any sort of support which they need, but they don't have support throughout the day, 24 hours a day. And I think dental practices, etc., I think they're all quite self-explanatory. So
yeah. And then back to Anupam Prashant, just moving on to the kind of conversation you were having before about subsidies by different states. Has the central government come out with any sector-specific schemes, recently that is kind of really so that would be beneficial for UK and other countries to invest into India? Anupam, if you go first.
Sure. So because there are quite a few schemes which are operational, but looking at maybe a few of the recent ones, one of the recent ones being the manufacture of hybrid and electric vehicles. So that scheme has been introduced in last budget, and that was for majorly for commercial vehicles like buses, 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers for commercial use, and 2-wheelers for private use is also permitted under this. And it provides a financial subsidy, and it also provides infrastructure development help, and as far as the private use vehicles are concerned, if the vehicle is more than 20,000 USD cost, then it's not eligible for the scheme. Similarly, there is another scheme for large-scale electronic manufacturing and production-linked incentives, and this scheme majorly targets the SMT components, semiconductor drivers, the PCBs, systems and package, ATMP units. And the quantum of incentive in this case is about 4 to 6% incentive on the incremental sales of goods manufactured in India, and the tenure is for 5 years in this case. Another similar one for electronics is the specified electronic component and semiconductor scheme, and that also provides good incentives and majorly for manufacturing of semiconductors, integrated chips, display fabrication units, semiconductor wafers, compound semiconductors, mechanic parts, etc. And the incentive for this is 25% on the capital expenditure, so that's even in case of R&D expenditure, there are certain benefits which are available under this scheme. And definitely government is looking for creating India as a hub for doing these kinds of electronic manufacturing. There are also schemes which make electronic manufacturing clusters. So apart from having schemes for manufacturing specific products, there is a scheme which provides certain clusters, and they provide collective infrastructure support and common facilities and amenities for like industrial parks. Then there are certain common facility centers which have been provided, and so this is specifically on the electronic front. In fact, recently there has been a scheme which was launched on 21st July this year during the pandemic, and that relates to the medical devices and bulk drugs. So bulk drug production, India was lacking quite a bit. When the pandemic started, it was realized that the major bulk drug for manufacture of your final products, pharma products in India, was coming from China. And that's where there was a sudden break in terms of raw materials coming in for the pharma industry. And there is definitely a requirement to speed up the manufacturing of the bulk drugs as well as medical devices in India. And that scheme has been launched just recently on the 21st July. And it is offering a financial incentive on an incremental basis of 5% on the sales of medical devices and bulk drugs. And that will definitely push up the reliance on the raw materials for medicines from India. Besides this, of course, there are area-specific schemes which the government has come up with. And typically the focus for the government is on the northeast states, which the development has not happened to the extent which has happened in the other states. So there has been a scheme which is being provided to promote the industries and promote the employment opportunities in the regions of northeast states of India. And this scheme will be in force till 31st March of 2022. And there are certain benefits, as which Prashant mentioned earlier. There are certain benefits in terms of capital investment incentives, similarly incentives and certain comprehensive insurance incentives, GST reimbursements, So there are quite a few bucket of investment incentives have been provided for this particular region, because the government is very serious and very interested in the development of this region.
And Prashant, what are your kind of brief overview of what the central government's doing?
So Anupam spoke about all the schemes except the Northeast schemes. All of the schemes Anupam spoke about have been notified from April to July. But there are more. I mean, some schemes are on the anvil. For example, the budget 2019-20 talked about the MRO sector. Now, India wants to strengthen its position in the aviation sector, and they expect a revenue of something like $5 billion from this sector. So we will await a scheme shortly to be announced in this sector. And the other, expected scheme is what I would say RODTEP, which is refund of duties and taxes on export products. Now, this scheme has been necessitated because India lost its case on some export promotion measures before the WTO because they were not WTO compliant. And therefore, now they are bringing in this scheme by way of a different mechanism, which will be WTO compliant. So this scheme actually will be reimbursement of taxes, duties at central, state, and provincial level will be provided, and this reimbursement will be provided through duty scripts, which can be traded. So we will look forward to this scheme, because if you have to realize the vision of India, then the trade policy is the key instrument which is going to realize that vision. And this RODTEP scheme is going to be a major factor. So that we will await this scheme. There are other key benefits that Anupam referred to earlier in the corporate sector, such as, I mean, I'll not get into that again, but lower taxation rate for domestic manufacturing units. And then additional employment weighted deduction. Then there is this for startups, you get tax holidays, and then you get R&D benefits in certain sectors. So on the whole, a huge amount of incentives to make this Make in India happen. Okay.
And you mentioned like duties and kind of government incentives there, but any mention of trade with India does remind us immediately of prospect of high duties, tedious processes. So what else is the government doing to kind of deal with this perception, of high duties and tedious processes?
So, perception is often the truth, but not necessarily so, because it changes over time. Now, I will deal with this question that we talked about duties and processes separately. Now, while contrary to the popular belief, Indian duties, the median rate of the duties is only 10%. Although in some consumer sectors, we are now seeing the reversal of trend, and consumer goods are being charged to higher and higher duties within the WTO bound rate, of course. But to reduce the impact of duties, there are many schemes, and one of them is exemptions, which are available to critical sectors like pharma, some of the key pharma ingredients, to oil and gas. There are exemptions available. If you want to set up business in India, there are project import schemes which have been in vogue for several years now. And if the project is, let's say, in power, etc., then the duties are zero. Power or water supply projects are zero. But otherwise, you get duty rates up to 5%, and everything that you bring in at 5%. You don't have to classify it separately. So these are some of the direct benefits. The other benefits come in the form of export promotion measures, like advance authorization schemes and duty remission schemes like duty drawback, etc. Besides that, there are other, merchandise export from India scheme and the ACI scheme. Merchandise export is the one which is going to be replaced by the RODTEP, which I mentioned earlier. There are several of these schemes. For avoiding payment of duty at the time of import, you can have also this special economic zone, but that's another chapter by itself altogether. Most importantly, for duty reduction, and what I have been seeing people are not taking adequate benefit of, are the FTAs, the free trade agreements there are 13 free trade agreements which are currently active, and 41 total are being negotiated. I believe the UK-India one FTA, which was just planned 10 days ago, will find a faster route and get there. But 41 FTA is being negotiated. So FTA is going to be another key area, and you need to organize your production to meet that value addition norms for being eligible to the FTA. So this was on the duty part. On the procedure part, again, two things. What does cumbersome procedure mean? Cumbersome procedure means time cost and money cost. So on the time cost, India has taken several measures. Like, it has been signatory to the trade facilitation agreement, which was there in 2016, and the action plan there involves total transparent ecosystem, paperless, risk-based systems of assessing the duties. It also involves, or let's say the customs have come up with a separate scheme, which is called a SWIFT, which reduces the interface between the custom authorities and trade. And also the dwell time of the goods, that it takes time to clear the goods, also is being reduced. Significant reduction has been achieved over the last 1 year. So with this, the Indian trading across border ranking, which was 80, is surely going to be much better this year. On the money cost side, typically what we have seen is these transaction costs for cross-border trade is about 15% of the value of the goods. And if you reduce even few percentage points, shave the few percentage points of that, the India's global competitiveness index, which is ranked where it is ranked at 39th place, will significantly go up. So what has government done to do that? There are two schemes I would like to talk about here, especially. First is the authorized economic operator scheme, which is aligned to on the basis of this global supply chain security, and which is designed on the basis of that safe framework of standards which were introduced after the 9/11 attack. The AEO scheme is a tier-based scheme. You get in tier 1 a little more high requirements for tier 2, tier 3, etc. But what it gives is a tremendous amount of benefits. The direct port delivery or the deferment in payment of duties. On direct port delivery, I have been told that a 40-feet container, a direct port delivery saves 20,000 rupees per container. So that's the kind of delivery cost saving that we are looking at. And secondly, I believe that every company which is in the cross-border trade must be part of the AEO scheme, because India is going to enter into mutual recognition agreements with other countries, which means if you are AEO here, your imports get cleared here faster, and your exports into other countries also get cleared faster because of the mutual recognition agreement. And the last point I would like to deal with is again rather the old scheme of manufacture under bond, which has been revived. Earlier it was available only to select kind of industries. Now anybody, and I emphasize that anybody can import under this manufacturing under bond, both inputs and capital goods, and defer the payment of duties. And defer how much? Defer till if you are going to use the inputs for exporting, then your duties are remitted forever. If you are going to import these goods for manufacturing and local clearances, then you pay the custom duty on inputs going into the finished product only at the time of clearance of the finished product, and there is no interest liability. So I would imagine that every person who is going to undertake manufacture in India should take benefit of this scheme. If you are not taking benefit, you should ask yourself why. So these are, no longer should this perception be carried now that India is a high duty or a cumbersome procedure kind of a country, because a lot is being done in that regard to remove that perception.
Okay. I mean, we're going to run a quick poll on that in terms of, has your organization registered as an AEO or undertaken manufacture under bond to save time and cost? So I'm just going to ask the audience to answer this question. We'll run this for a few seconds. So is this stuff that you're also aware of, Nicholas, in terms of this is more India relevant, but understanding what this means for your UK counterparts?
Yeah, so if a query comes in like that, obviously then we have to field it on to Anupam, Prashant and their colleagues. But it's a question that has come across my bows without me having detailed knowledge of it.
We've got about, so attendees, we're going to give you another 10, 15 seconds to hit one of the buttons.
Good that people want to know more, isn't it?
I know, so I think what we can do after is obviously you and especially Prashant and Anupam can talk to those clients in more detail with regards to the schemes and how to get involved and take benefits of those schemes. Right, we're going to move on to, I think, a question, Nicholas, you're keen on, which is what is the point of lawyers? And isn't it all about commercial relations? And I think it's a question people have been asking, commercial and private, for a long time. So one, what's the point of lawyers? Two, isn't all this more about the commercial relations between businesses at CXO level? And how can a law firm help to reduce risk for Indian companies doing business with UK entities?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think a lot of people are too polite to ask that question, but you know from your own social circle that that is something that people ask. And my wife works in-house at a hotel chain, and you know, a lot of the time the business people there think, oh, let's just do this deal. You know, we don't want legal advisors getting in the way. In-house counsel are a bit of a different story because they get pressure to try and do the work themselves. And you know, my theme here is that we have to acknowledge a lot of business between India and the UK is done without recourse to lawyers. So especially with the SMEs, and I have to admit, sometimes that works, right? If everything goes smoothly and if the counterparty is good and there isn't a dispute, then they can have successful trade. I'd say the likelihood of it being successful long term, you know, is decreased the longer that they try that. So it's always fine if it works. And anecdotally, it always works, right? Because the business people who succeed, they tell everyone. The business people that fail usually keep it to themselves, or they blame external factors, right? It's never their fault. And no one ever says, if only I had a lawyer. It's just not what people say. So realistically, though, the lawyers are there for cross-border trade. I would say the value that we add is much greater than the value that we add for just purely domestic work. So UK to UK companies, they always get lawyers involved. And I would say that the value that we add in those situations is actually less than the value that we add in cross-border India to UK work. And that is because of the risk factor. You don't know what you don't know. And half the time, when you're dealing cross-border like that, there's a lot of stuff that you did not know to ask if you're a business person. Same goes to in-house counsel, who are used to doing, you know, if it's a big company, they've got an in-house team, they're used to doing the employment, the tenancy, the leasehold arrangements. They're not so familiar with these one-off deals or cross-border arrangements like that. So what are we doing? We're helping people minimize the risk, ring fence it, identify that risk, because there's always stuff that they will not have thought to put into a contract, for example. More importantly, though, than all that stuff, you know, a lot of the time the clients say to us, oh, we want you to help with a contract. We want a watertight contract between India and the UK. It's not going to be watertight. Doesn't matter how cleverly we draft it. What happens if there's a breach? Right now you're on the whole 1,120 days enforcement thing, in misery. So what's more important than all that? Due diligence. So if you're an Indian company dealing with a bunch of UK guys, I don't care who's related to who or who's the friend of who else, they're going to hand over to someone else eventually. You don't know those guys. You need to have done your legal due diligence on that UK entity. Nothing more important. It's more important than the contract. If you're going to save costs, save it on something else. And the way that we do that is actually pretty rigorous in both directions. Because Anupam and Prashant's firm have helped us with the diligence on the Indian companies, legal due diligence, as well as personal network due diligence. And that is what we recommend to anyone, even if it's not an investment. So it might just be a contractual arrangement. You find a UK distributor or you've got a UK supplier, whatever it is. You need to know not only the legal basis for all that stuff, who are these guys legally, what is their profile, but also network due diligence, which means who are the individuals behind it and what sort of people are they? What is their business network in the UK? And you think you know it because you've shaken hands with the guys and had dinner and because someone else knows someone who knows someone. That is never good enough when it comes to things going badly. And there's always a stage in every business relationship when it is not smooth sailing, when there's a bit of a hiccup, and that's when all this work that you've done, the capital investment that you've made in legal advice, comes home to roost.
Well, at what point would you bring in the lawyers? Because obviously, you know, a lot of these, especially cross-border, is at the CXO level, CFO level, strategic business transactions.
Sooner the better, and the higher level the better. You need engagement early on, because, you know, going back to that due diligence point, if we've sniffed out a serious problem, it might even be a deal breaker. It probably isn't a deal breaker. We don't ever do red light, you know, no, you can't deal with these guys. What we would do is do the amber light. We'd say, deal with these guys, but here are the issues you need to identify and minimize the risk of. And usually that does have to go up to a CFO type level.
Okay, great. And then Anupam, what's your viewpoint on that? Like, you know, what is the point of lawyers? And it's actually, I think, an even more pertinent question in India now, because the in-house community, as you know, has really accelerated and evolved in the last 5-6 years, especially at the MNC GCs. You know, they do a lot of work in-house. So it's a big question for the Indian lawyer as well.
Right. So as Nicholas said, you know, there has to be the pitfalls have to be identified and plugged in, and even you need to point out what could be the possible threats or possible deal breakers in that. So that identification, I think lawyers are the best in terms of identifying them when you come to a specific kind of a transaction, people who have experience in those kind of transaction. Also, which on a lighter side, which Nicholas mentioned, in terms of if you have to get your contract settled after having a dispute, you know, it's a long fight and a long way through. So the way to put it is that, you know, if you spend on lawyers, it is, you know, it's penny, you know, rather than if you don't decide to spend on lawyers, it's like penny wise and pound foolish. You know, if you have some problems later on, it could result into big legal bills.
Yeah, you know, I think we've got a few minutes left that we could actually do some Q&A. So if we want to take a couple of questions. I think there was one for Nick in particular at the beginning, which was okay, one question is, many investors are investing into geo. Do you think that this could lead to a monopoly in the technology industry? Which I think will be more for Anupam and Prashant.
Anupam, can I take this question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, this is a particular sector, telecom sector. You will not have many players. You will have not necessarily a monopoly, but maybe a duopoly or oligopoly. But you will not have many players. And the way we had so many players in the telecom industry is because we had given licenses per regions, etc. That was bound to be, you know, bound to collapse, and a few players who actually are strong players, they're bound to emerge. So while particular investments have been pointed out in this question, I would like to say that because Geo is going to become very strong, there will be other investments in competition, and you will have something like other, and I don't want to mention the players here, but you will have duopoly, if not oligopoly. But we have seen this world over. I mean, how big is Amazon? When you talk about Amazon, in India you have Flipkart, but otherwise Amazon is kind of the largest player, right? Or Alibaba in China. They are some of the unique and big, large players. So I hope that this should not lead to monopoly, but I do not think that should be a worry. I do believe that there will be investments which will come into other players as well, and make it at least a duopoly. Plus, the players themselves in telecom sectors are saying that this particular player, which is Vodafone, should be allowed to subsist. I mean, we know today also we read in the newspapers 25,000 crore loss. So there will be something, government intervention will be there, and government will ensure that it's not a monopoly. We have a competition act to take care of those things.
Okay. Nicholas, there was one specifically to you. I'm not sure, I mean, you may want to get help from Anupam Prashant, but what do you expect from India with regards to helping it boost FDI into India? So what advice would you give the government? And do you have, what is your view on the Make in India policy?
Yeah. Well, definitely, Anupam and Prashant are more experts on that, but I'm guessing the questioner wants to get a sort of British viewpoint on it. And generally, people's view over here is that those who know about it, I would say, because for some reason, the publicity surrounding Indian policies is not as widely re-reported as publicity relating to China still. And that's partly because there's so much negative press about China that people feel the need to balance it up. But those who are looking at following what India does, it's very positive. And there's a strong feeling that almost the UK has a kind of duty to support the development of the commercial opportunities with India. So Made in India thing is a great thing because it's seen as an alternative to other perhaps more risky or more hostile governments. And also the other very positive thing generally about the UK-India policy is because of Brexit, which actually Prashant already mentioned it, but it's a really important point, is that a lot of people who've said, oh, Brexit's all about the UK shrinking away from the rest of the world. We've seen that the opposite is true, that because of a shrinking away perhaps from such close engagement with Europe, that means inevitably that the UK is actively looking for partners around the world. India is the most populous nation in the Commonwealth, obviously, and of those that are politically aligned to us. So that's a very general. It's not quite as perhaps specific as the questioner would like. I don't know, Anupam and Prashant want to add to that.
So specifically on FDI, as I mentioned earlier, there have been a lot of changes and there is a lot of encouragement that has been happening. And we have seen quite a bit of attraction over the last 2 to 3 years in terms of inquiries coming around setting up ancillary or supportive manufacturing for big manufacturers. And that has been quite a positive thing. And Make in India has definitely pushed people to think about India as a manufacturing destination. And as Nicholas mentioned, India itself has the largest population. So apart from looking for other markets to market their product, if you manufacture in India, India itself also provides a large market. So yes, I would definitely say that it's a very positive way of going forward.
Okay, great. We're going to just do our last poll before we summarize. There were some other questions. So for the audience, for the questions we've not been able to answer, we will capture them and then put a written answer together for you, which we'll email out to you post the webinar. The last question, poll 2, or generic, but for the attendees, would you like to have any more guidance and support on your matters pertaining to the UK-India investment corridor? So while that poll is live, I'd just really like each of you to kind of give your 30-second summary of the discussion we've been having today. So Syed, I'll bring you back in to really kind of summarize your thoughts from today. You're on mute, Syed.
I think it's been a very interesting discussion, in particular comments made by Prashant and Anupam, which were more India specific, were very interesting. Obviously, due to the pandemic, many of the difficulties that the UK is facing, India is also facing as well. Hopefully we'll all come out stronger as a result of it, and hopefully as a result of Brexit as well. The relationship between the UK and India will hopefully be stronger than ever. So,
yeah. So attendees, the poll will still be live, and we'll just summarize another minute. Nicholas, your viewpoints on what can be done more about the relationship?
you know, this has just woken me up to how much I didn't know. You know, I deal with these guys all day, every day, and we never have the chance to sort of sit down and talk about general topics because it is always very client specific or focused on a particular matter. So actually, I've learned so much today from Prashant, Anupam, and actually Syed as well, who's my colleague in England. So, you know, it just shows how I don't normally listen enough. I think the general picture is, so, you know, this wasn't scripted, so we don't know what each other are going to say. One thing that encouraged me was that people share my view, which is I'm hugely optimistic about UK-India trade. I just think there is going to be more and more of it following the trajectory of the last couple of years. And everything I've heard today suggests that that is going to continue. And we just need to, I think our role as service providers is to help shepherd that, which is an inevitable trajectory. We just need to make it more efficient.
Yeah, super. And I think the audience kind of reiterating your thoughts, Nicholas, because, you know, pretty much everyone is saying they'd like to know much more around the UK-India investment corridor. So I think,
good to hear.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
Anupam, your viewpoint, your summary.
One important point which I just wanted to make is on Brexit. Prior to Brexit, of course, Britain was very much aligned and giving priority in terms of trade and movement of people with Europe. But with the Brexit, if India was coming in the third place, first they had to look at internally in Britain, then go to Europe, and then go to India. But Brexit happening, I think we are now lined up with all the European countries as well, and that's a big opportunity for the Indian businesses as well as the UK to have UK partners to come into India and vice versa.
The level playing.
Interesting viewpoint there, actually, about, you know, India's opportunity shifting up on a par with Europe. Prashant, your summary.
So, you know, I spoke about the UK-India possible FTA and early harvest scheme, but like we have with some of the countries in the Southeast Asia, we could have a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement as well, SHICA, as you know, that we mentioned. And that is going to give a tremendous boost to this UK-India investment corridor. And I believe that the government is going to fast track, looking at the needs and the China angle, etc. Today, the government is going to definitely fast track this particular FTA, and I'm all eagerly awaiting the specifics. And so should the companies who are interested in doing the cross-border trade with each other be interested, because it will give tremendous benefits, not only in terms of duty rates that we mentioned about, which is part of the FTA, but many other comprehensive economic benefits that it will bring about. You know, it does deal with other IPR matters, for example, movement of natural persons, for example. So I believe that there is a new chapter and new beginning in UK-India relationship that is on the anvil.
And great points, I think, from all of you. I've enjoyed being part of this webinar. Again, thank you, gentlemen, for, you know, sharing your thoughts, your expertise, you know, with our audience. You know, and I think there's that saying about, you know, in every cloud there's a silver lining. So even with Brexit and the COVID situation, you kind of summarized and shown that there are, you know, opportunities, you know, between the two countries to work even more effectively together. You know, and we will share, as I said, afterwards, you know, we can talk to the attendees who need more information, and you know, you can reach out to them, you know, with more of that information. Again, thank you very much, gentlemen, for today.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Vikas, for sharing.
Thank you.
And thanks to the attendees.
Thanks, guys.